Hey everyone, Disappointed Giant here. It's clearly no secret that I'm a huge Dead Cells fan, but there are a handful of other special games that I love playing that also take up a good amount of space in my brain. I haven't made any videos for other games on the channel up until this point for a handful of reasons, but it's mainly because I didn't want to step outside of Dead Cells content so that we'd have a one-stop shop for guides, tier lists, and other miscellaneous videos without any extra clutter or split content. After the first year of running the channel, we now have 4 full tutorial guides covering the entirety of the game's mechanics across all 6 difficulties, a handful of smaller guides that talk about more nuanced aspects and features of the game, over 10 hours of tier lists that cover 146 items and 53 mutations, and several long plays, collaborations, and commentated runs. That's a lot of Dead Cells content. With this video, I'm finally diversifying a bit, and I'm going to talk about a game using the language of Dead Cells to break down its mechanics and progression, so folks who have played Dead Cells may be able to better understand it. I'm also hopeful that fans of this other game might find this video and come out of it with a better understanding of Dead Cells, since I'll be using the language of the other game to talk about Dead Cells. That other game is also a roguelite and has most of my gaming hours behind Dead Cells. That other game is one of my favorite games of all time. That other game is Hades. This video will be a general overview for giving a basic understanding of the main mechanics of both Dead Cells and Hades, using the terminologies of one game's mechanics to roughly translate the other. This is not a deep dive or an extensive guide for either game. If you're new to Dead Cells and you want to learn more about the game, I recommend watching my tutorial series playlist, which I'll link below. If you come out of this video looking for more Hades content, then you're in luck because there are tons of good videos and channels out there. I recommend starting with Jawless Paul's channel, which I'll also link to in the description. I love JP. I've rewatched his Hades guides and tier lists dozens of times and have spent a ton of hours watching his commentated runs. I'm not kidding you, I have probably watched all of these at least once. So now that I've covered the basics, it's time to make our way out of the underground, or the underworld, from 2 different perspectives. In order for me to figure out where it's best to start talking about both Dead Cells and Hades, I think it's important to understand where both games end. In Dead Cells, when you lose a run, you'll end up back at the very beginning of the game in the Prisoner's Quarters, which is the game's introductory level. It's not a proper hub, but it does have some doors you can go through that will allow you to practice using your weapons, and you can change up your cosmetics, among other things. Dead Cells is not a dialogue-heavy game, so aside from a couple of static NPCs, there's really nobody here to talk to and no main story to progress. You choose your difficulty, grab your starting weapons, and then the run begins. When you die in Hades, you'll emerge from the pool of sticks in the House of Hades, which is where the main character Zagreus, his eponymous and mean-spirited father, and a diverse crew of NPCs reside. Hades is a very dialogue-heavy and story-driven game, so after a run, you can usually talk to a bunch of characters to progress the main story and some side quests. Here's where you can change up some cosmetics and cash in or trade up some resources. After leaving the main hall, you can choose your character perks, grab your starting weapon and keepsake, choose your difficulty, and then the run begins. Since improving your character is paramount in both games, let's talk about each game's meta currencies. Dead Cells is pretty straightforward. You have cells. Upon death, you lose everything, so any unspent cells you're carrying will be gone forever. You need a ton of cells to unlock almost all of the game's upgrades, ranging from new items, stronger weapons, and permanent character upgrades. It can be pretty devastating when you accidentally take a huge hit and lose hundreds of cells that you've been saving up. There's not a lot of resource management strategy here. You get cells and you spend cells while trying not to die in the process. In Hades, there are 7 types of meta currency, which are all tied to different branches of progression. That's the bad news. The good news is that no matter how much currency you pick up and are carrying during a run, whether it's darkness or keys or Titan blood, you won't lose any of it when you die. Even though losing a run in Hades doesn't feel particularly great, knowing that there are no progression penalties tied to death can lighten the blow. since every run kicks you back to the House of Hades where dozens of characters have hundreds of dialogue trees. Losing a run can also be seen as a type of meta progression. The more runs you lose, the more opportunities you have to speak with NPCs. This means that by dying, you'll have the opportunity to progress the main story and side quests even if it feels like Zagreus isn't. Some of the most important upgrades for player progression in Dead Cells are the ones that you'll see at the very top of the collector's menu. These general upgrades are what allow you to have more permanent perks and to tip the scales in your favor before you even pick up a weapon in a run. These are upgrades like extra flask charges, how much starting gold you have, and having more control over what will show up in a shop. The equivalent in Hades is the Mirror of Night, which has a bunch of unlockable upgrades that will affect things like Zagreus' base health, how much starting gold you have, and having more control over what boons will show up in a run. The currency required to unlock these upgrades is called Darkness, which you'll get in small amounts over the course of a run, but you'll also get larger amounts if you beat a boss on a difficulty that you've already cleared. These general upgrades are incredibly important in both Hades and Dead Cells as they grant your character passive and perpetual bonuses that will help you improve your runs in either game. If you're a new player, I recommend focusing on the top of the collector's menu and whatever you have available in the Mirror of Night as much as possible early on. There are lots of unlockable items in Dead Cells, but before you can use them, you often need to find blueprints, which are usually hidden in specific areas or have a set percentage to drop from enemies. There's a chance that you could play Dead Cells for hundreds of hours before seeing every unlockable in the game. There is no blueprint equivalent in Hades. Weapons are unlocked in the courtyard by spending chthonic keys, which are another one of the game's meta currencies. In Hades, there isn't much RNG that gates weapon unlocks, as every main weapon can be unlocked in the training room as long as you have enough keys. Most of the variants of these weapons can be unlocked by using another currency called Titan Blood. There is a fourth hidden aspect of each weapon that requires specific conversations with specific people to unlock, but as long as you meet the requirements for those unlocks, they'll happen eventually. No ultra rare blueprints here. While it's easier to unlock all of the weapons in Hades, a big part of this is that there's just way less of them. Since we're talking about weapons, I think this is a good spot to get into the differences of how each game's weapon and skill systems work. In Dead Cells, there's all kinds of different types of weapons. In this example, let's focus on bows, which are mostly used for ranged attacks. You start the game with the most basic version called the Beginner's Bow. All this does is shoot arrows. As you unlock more weapons, you'll find different types of bows. The Multiple Nox Bow will shoot multiple arrows at once. The Alchemic Carbine shoots poisonous vials that will break on impact and poison enemies. The Ice Bow has arrows that will freeze and slow enemies. These are all completely different items, but they're all the same type of weapon, and you can change your weapons as much as you wish throughout your runs. In Hades, there are only 6 types of main weapons, and when you pick a weapon, you'll need to use it for the entire run. Starting weapons mechanics are all pretty straightforward, but they get more powerful by meeting various Greek gods in your run who will bless you with their boons. Instead of having a bunch of different kinds of weapons to use, Hades has a bunch of different modifiers you can apply to your weapons thanks to these gods. To mirror the Dead Cells example above, let's use Coronacht, the bow. In its most basic form, all it does is shoot arrows. If you find a Daedalus hammer, which is an item that will grant unique weapon modifiers for your run, you might find the Twin Shot or Triple Shot upgrade, which could be the equivalent of Dead Cells' Multi-Nox bow. If you find Dionysus' attack boon, the arrows will apply Hangover, which is Hades' version of a poison bow. You can think of this like the Alchemic Carbine. If instead you come across Demeter and she grants you her attack boon, your arrows will inflict the Chill status effect, which will slow enemies, so your basic bow can become something akin to the Ice Bow. Where Dead Cells builds have lots of potential due to the amount of items you can use during a run, Hades has lots of potential due to the amount of modifiers you can get during a run. Dead Cells goes wide and Hades goes deep. Both games rely heavily on RNG during a run, but they each approach it differently. I look at Dead Cells' RNG on a larger scale. When you enter a biome, every scroll, secret, and item are all generated at once. There's one big piece of game to play through and everything is interconnected. You can go back to any part of the biome at any point before leaving, so the entirety of the level is always available to you. In Hades, the RNG effects happen more frequently and are on a smaller scale. There are 4 biomes in the game, and each one is broken up into small, distinct rooms that each will have their own reward for completing them. You may get darkness from one of these rooms, or more max HP, or the opportunity to spend some of your money in Charon's shop. With the exception of said shops, you can't leave a room without taking its reward, and you can't go back to rooms you've already explored. So imagine that if in Dead Cells, biomes were segmented so that each teleporter was a locked door instead, and you couldn't go past it until you completely cleared out the section you're in and picked up the item or bonus after you defeated all the enemies. You have more freedom in Dead Cells to decide on how much you want to explore and how many enemies you want to kill, but in Hades, you're locked into each room and you're required to clear everything out and take the bonus or the boon at the end. Forcing rewards and boons on the player is a big part of how Hades funnels you into going deep with your build. As you progress in each game and beat the final boss on the default difficulty level, you'll have the option of increasing the difficulty of your runs. In Dead Cells, there's the boss cell mechanic, which is a static difficulty increase that has modifiers that you can't control. If you go from 2 boss cells to 3 boss cells, the difficulty modifiers for things like enemy health and flask refills are set in stone. The reward for beating a run with any build is unlocking the next difficulty, which allows you to then play a harder version of the game to unlock the next difficulty, from 0 all the way up to 5 boss cells. You can change the game's difficulty level at the beginning of the prisoner's quarters before you start your run. In Hades, once you beat the final boss, you'll see something in the courtyard called the Pact of Punishment. This is the rough equivalent to increasing the BC level in Dead Cells, but you have exponentially more control over how the game gets harder. Instead of having static difficulty increases that are based on each BC level, you can increase Hades' difficulty options in small increments, which is called heat. You get to decide if you want to give enemies more health, or make elite enemies more powerful, or if you want to grant bosses special modifiers that will make their fights more challenging and more complex. When you beat a run on each heat, the bosses will drop important types of currency that will allow you to upgrade your weapons and unlock other upgrades. Heat is tracked individually for each weapon, and you'll get new rewards all the way up to 20 heat on each weapon that you use. This means you'll need to beat 21 runs with each weapon in increasing heat to get the maximum amount of bounties. 126 runs is a lot of gameplay. I appreciate both the boss cell system and the heat system in their own way. Dead Cells is more straightforward and has less fidgeting with options. You pick a difficulty and then you go. That's it. If you're having trouble on, say, 2BC, your best bet is to fill out your permanent and weapon upgrades and try different options to see what will work best on getting you to that next boss cell. Hades' difficulty system is clearly more complicated, but it also has more potential to increase difficulty in a way that better suits someone's playstyle and preferences. If you play hard and fast, you can increase the heat level with tight deadlines, so you'll get extra heat by completing runs quickly. If you find yourself taking lots of damage, you can ignore the hard labor condition that makes enemies hit harder and can increase other modifiers to get your heat level up so you can unlock more bounties. As I mentioned earlier, Dead Cells has just one meta currency: cells. Hades has 7 of them, with the most weighty one being Titan Blood. You'll get 2 Titan Blood for bounties for each run that you complete on a new heat level, which is one of the reasons why increasing the heat during your runs is so important. Each weapon aspect has its own individual upgrade level. So if you spend 5 of your Titan Blood on the basic spear, it will be at max level from here on out. The other spear aspects will not benefit from the 5 blood that you spent. In my opinion, it's important to test out each aspect to see what you like best and then get those to a higher level so the default weapons that you're most comfortable with will give you a better chance to complete a run. The Dead Cells equivalent of this is my favorite topic to talk about: the Forge. Unlike Hades, where each weapon's aspect level and quality is based on how much Titan blood you spend on that individual aspect, upgrading Dead Cells' Forge will give you a higher percentage chance that any weapon or skill that you pick up will be of higher quality. For example, if you fill the first gauge on the Forge up to 65%, that means that any weapon you find will have a 65% chance to be of plus quality, which is the equivalent of adding 2 additional gear levels to a base weapon. If you spend total 10,000 cells to fill the S rank up to 100%, then that means that every single item that you find will be of the highest gear quality possible, regardless of whether it's a pure nail or an emergency door. Having some, most, or all of your items at high quality is incredibly useful and completely necessary to progress in the game. The downside to this is that you can only upgrade the Forge in the main game after bosses. If you're carrying a bunch of cells and you die, you lose them all. But in Hades, if you find Titan blood and die, you keep it. Dead Cells has a higher risk factor for a more consistent reward across all weapons, whereas Hades allows for more deliberate and safe upgrades for each individual weapon aspect. Both games have money as a currency. There's gold in Dead Cells and there's Obols in Hades. At the end of a run, you lose most or all of your gold, so it's best to spend it before your run ends, regardless of which game you're playing. You can start a run with some extra gold in your pockets with permanent upgrades. There's the Gold Reserves upgrades that you can get from the Collector in Dead Cells, and the Deep Pockets upgrade from the Mirror of Night in Hades. You can also use Hypnosis' Chthonic Coin Purse keepsake to start a run with additional gold in your wallet. So what's a keepsake? Keepsakes in Hades are equipable items that will grant you a particular bonus or effect. I like to think of these like mutations in Dead Cells, since there are general gameplay modifiers that can be swapped out between biomes and have some kind of impact on the run while they're being used. In Dead Cells, you're required to take up to 3 mutations, but in Hades, you can only wear 1 keepsake at a time. Additionally, Hades lets you pick a keepsake before a run, but Dead Cells only lets you choose a mutation after you complete the first biome, which means you can manipulate the first biome more consistently in Hades. Regardless of which game you're playing, you're going to want to try to optimize what keepsake or mutations you take to help tip the scales in your favor against the hundreds of monsters and enemies that await. Are you worried about an untimely death? Then choose the Lucky Tooth in Hades, or YOLO in Dead Cells. Want to buff your move speed while you play? Either Lambent Plume or Velocity will do the trick. Need more health? How about choosing Soldier's Resistance or the Spiked Collar? Hades has keepsakes that are tied to specific gods, which will ensure that you'll meet them in the next biome of your run. I'm really stretching with this one, but maybe this is kind of like a real-time light Dead Cells custom mode where you can remove some RNG to make sure that you have a better chance of seeing specific boons that you want. Since Hades lets you stack deep as your run goes on, you'll find that the gods you meet will grant you more kinds of powerful boons to improve your runs. For example, if you come across Aphrodite, you'll likely meet her again at some point during your run, and taking some of her boons will open up more intricate build paths to secondary boons that will make her weak effects more powerful. So the more you can manipulate the god pool to get what you want, the stronger and more cohesive your build may be. Similar to how removing weapons from your item pool in Dead Cells will allow you to get what you want earlier in your run to help your build come together, using a god's keepsake to force their appearance will likewise allow you to get what you want to help your build come together. Just like how there are 4 item slots in Dead Cells, 2 for your main weapons and 2 for your skills, you have 4 main boon slots in Hades. 1 each for your weapon's main and special attacks, so your 2 main slots, and then 1 each for your dash and your cast, which is the rough equivalent of Dead Cells' 2 skill slots. Although it is easier to build around a secondary slot in Hades, since some casts have the potential to become very powerful. Aside from getting stronger through normal progression, there are also curse mechanics in both games that will allow you to power up even more during your run. In Dead Cells, if you see a curse chest, you can open it for an item, some money, and a scroll, which you can use to increase your damage output and max HP. You need to kill 10 enemies without taking damage to clear the curse. If you get hit once, you'll die and you'll get kicked back to the prisoner's quarters. In Hades, you can find Chaos Gates, which will cost some HP to enter and will let you choose a boon that has some sort of short-term pain in exchange for long-term gain. Instead of killing a certain amount of enemies to clear a curse, you'll need to survive a certain amount of encounters for the Chaos Boon to lose its negative perk and gain its positive one. You'll want to prioritize taking Chaos Gates when you can, unless they happen to come right before a boss, since the downsides of a negative Chaos Boon could spell your doom at the hands of an angry Hydra. In Dead Cells, you usually shouldn't take a curse just right before a boss if you don't have the enemies to clear it. Taking a curse into a boss room could spell your doom at the hands of an angry timekeeper. There are a couple of other minor similarities that I just want to mention briefly. In Dead Cells, you can find an incentivized biome which will reward you with extra cells and gold if you take that path during your run. In Hades, there's a feature called Dark Thirst, but instead of incentivizing a biome, it incentivizes one of your weapons, so you'll get additional darkness and gems if you choose that weapon for your run. Both of these features encourage variation since you'll get more meta currency if you take what the game suggests. I often use Hades' Dark Thirst to decide what weapon I want to pick for a run, and I'll path my Dead Cells runs using incentivized biomes. If you're exploring either game, I recommend that you do the same. In Dead Cells, you can find locked doors that are gated behind boss cell levels, which is similar to Hades' Erebus gates, which are gated behind heat level. The higher your difficulty, the more chances you'll have for additional resources throughout your runs. In an unexpected twist of fate, you'll lose your reward from Hades' Erebus gate if you take a single hit during that encounter, which harkens back a bit to Dead Cells' curse mechanic. And last but not least, regardless of which game you're playing and how you're playing it, there's one final obvious similarity between the two. Try not to get hit. So there we have it. Hopefully this video was helpful whether you're a Dead Cells fan, a Hades fan, or both. If you're looking for more Dead Cells videos, then you should check out my tutorial playlist, or feel free to poke around the channel to see if there's another video or series that you might find helpful. If you're interested in learning more about Hades, then please check out and support Jawless Paul's channel since he has so much great Hades information over there. There was a lot of info to cover here in this relatively short video, so there's a good chance that I missed something along the way. If you have any additional comparisons of your own, feel free to leave them in the comments below to share your insight. As someone whose heart belongs to both Dead Cells and Hades, if you take anything away from this video, I hope it's that both of these games are well worth playing and they're well worth your time. As always, thank you for watching, and good luck out there.